Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Shanza Khan. I'm the founder and CEO of Ion Ivy. Today, we are joined by one of our star students, Muzna Sohail from Learning Alliance International. Muzna has recently been accepted at Cambridge University. Our podcast today is going to feature her journey, how she prepared, and all the steps she took in order to secure the acceptance so that it's easier for you guys to follow the same path. Welcome, Muzna. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm doing good. I want to, first of all, thank you for inviting me here today. So regarding my Cambridge application journey, it definitely had a lot of ups and downs, I would say. When starting out, I felt that my grades, especially in my O levels or my MYP, they weren't the best. They were more or less, I would say, very average. And so I felt that throughout my DP1 or A1, I had to really push myself that extra mile to be even consider myself at that par to apply to such a university. And so especially throughout my DP1, I engaged in a lot of extracurriculars, as well as prepared for the admission test. So it was quite a process.
Muzna, if you don't mind sharing with our audience, what was your score in MYP? Because I want other students to know that it's not out of the running if you have such a score.
Yeah, I got a 46 out of 56 in my MYP. But in MYP, I did take extended math, whereas most people just take normal math. And I did get a 6 in it out of 7, so I think that may have some extent.
So, guys, MYP, for those of you who don't know, is part of the International Baccalaureate. It's a middle years program. It's equivalent to your O levels, and it's out of 56. So Muzna got a 46, but she makes an important point that she went the extra mile to take a difficult subject, extended mathematics, which most students will shy away from. And I do think you're right, Muzna, that does differentiate you from the others. I find it very interesting when you say that you decided to double down and work harder during your DP years or your equivalent A-level years to make sure your dreams remained achievable. Yeah. So first, let's talk about what are the subjects you took in DP in order to differentiate yourselves. What were your subjects in DP? What was at the higher level and at the standard level?
So initially, at the beginning of DP1, I had standard level English, language and literature, standard level French ab initio, the beginner course, and standard level physics. And then for my higher levels, I had higher level chemistry, higher level economics, and higher level math analysis and approaches. But then halfway through DP1, I ended up dropping physics because I didn't want to go into engineering. I just felt like it was an extra burden on me that I didn't need. And so instead, I made my chemistry to a standard level, and I took an additional business and management at higher level. So in the end, my higher levels were economics, math, and business.
So a very important point to our listeners tuning in today. I know that there's often a lot of pressure to take science-related subjects. But if you're planning to go towards the social sciences, then taking the right courses at the higher level is in fact going to put you in an advantage. So which course did you apply to for your UK universities, Muzna? Where all did you apply? How did you select your universities? Did you always know that Cambridge is my dream university?
Cambridge, yes, it was actually always my dream university. I really wanted to apply there. As for the others, I did choose some safety ones, I would say, and then some as well, other high-ranking ones besides Cambridge, such as LSE and UCL. And I'm still waiting to hear back from them, so inshallah. All my courses that I applied to were economics-centered. Like in Cambridge, I did land economy, and then in some others, I did economics with math or environmental studies and economics, to do with around, it was always economics-centered.
So clearly you knew that you wanted to study economics.
Yeah.
And what kind of extracurriculars did you take or do from the period of MYP onwards, which you felt would help you towards realizing your academic passion of economics?
So initially, I did a lot of courses. I started off with doing some very basic level ones from LinkedIn Learning, which is completely free. And I had the skill of kind of being interested in computer science. So I taught myself Python through that. And because I was like, oh, doing these courses, I'm like, oh, I can do this. Like, this is actually interesting. So then I talked to my parents and they agreed to pay for some harder courses like from via Coursera from like University of Pennsylvania and JP Morgan and Yale regarding like data analytics with economics and mix like Python into that. And so I did those courses and I found that they were really, helpful, challenging and insightful. And so I was searching online for possible internship opportunities, and I came across this platform called SHEER, which stands for Society of Higher Education and Industrial Research. And on there, there was this PhD student studying in Malaysia, and his work was centered around the stock market in Malaysia. And so I read his work. I found it to be like very insightful and engaging. And so by chance, I reached out to him and he answered. And so we agreed to do like this research internship with me and my twin sister. And so in the internship, he taught me how to like analyze the stock market and trends using Python, which I was already quite confident in. And so then I wrote an article about the stock market on the US. And I'm in the process of like getting it published. And I think that was a very big thing. I also mentioned in my personal statement, which was later asked about in my interview. I think that was like a very big thing. Furthermore, some other extracurriculars I did were the Blue Ocean art.
So before we go there, Muzna, I actually want to, for our listeners, highlight a couple of really important points you raised. One, she put herself out there by taking extra courses, starting off with the free ones, moving on to some very difficult paid ones. More important than that, I think the fact that Muzna put herself out there by reaching out to different PhD students, you can even reach out to faculty members and saying, I want to do research with you, is what set her apart. So something for my audience to kind of internalize, always think about how can you differentiate yourself from everybody else out there. Now, I know a question that if we had a live audience, Muzna, and I have parents asking me this too, what you're describing is actually very challenging.
Yeah.
And the question that a parent would ask is, how did you juggle this? When did you do the extra courses? IB is difficult as it is. So for those of you who don't know the IB curriculum, you're taking 6 courses. You're taking 3 standard level courses, 3 higher level courses. You have to do an extended essay, a TOK, community service. When did you find the time to take these courses? Did you do them just over the summer? Did you do them over the year? And how did you manage doing this research with the student?
So it was mainly, I did all this over the summer. So after DP1 was when I was like, oh, I have more time now, I'm more free. So then I was like, instead of maybe not working as hard during the summer, I think the summer is what can potentially set you apart from other applicants in the sense that you can choose what you want to do with it. You can make it really productive, or you can find other things to do. So in the summer, was when I started doing the courses. And the more you do, essentially, the more easier it gets for you. And so I would just spend all day on these courses.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. The first 2 weeks of summer, I admit I didn't do anything. It was pure like relaxation for me. But then after that, I was like, I have to get back into the mindset. And with IB, the thing is, you need to be like very constant with your efforts. So I was working on my extended essay as well, which I also incorporated my Python skills into my extended essay. And so I was already getting like practice from there. And then so I was like, why not just take this a step further? I mean, I have the time. So I think I can really do something with this. And that's when I decided to start doing the courses. And that's when I initially reached out to the PhD student as well. And so the internship started like I would say at the end of summer. And then in the beginning of DP2, it wasn't that hectic yet. So I continued with it. I put some like extra hours on the weekends especially, and then I kind of wrapped it up there before, the deadlines really started to hit. Yeah.
So time management clearly was key.
Yeah.
Using your summers wisely is extremely important. You mentioned using your research as part of your extended essay as well, which
Yeah.
I think is very smart to do.
Yeah.
The extended essay is a requirement of the IB. You have to do it anyway, but you went the extra mile to incorporate your
Yeah.
learnings from other area, which I think kind of made it more vibrant. Tell our audience a little bit about what your extended essay was on.
So in IB, you have to focus your extended essay on one subject group. So I did mine in economics. And my research question, it was on to what extent could IMF's 2019 Extended Fund Facility help reduce the negative burden of balance of payments for Pakistan? And in the extended essay, how I incorporated my own Python abilities into it was that, so I wanted to take, my teacher told me that in order to secure a really good score, you should do something that's off course, as generally all extended essays, you're meant to do something that's off course. So, you have that, you can show the examiner, oh, like I'm actually passionate about this, I'm interested in this. And so what I did was, I looked online and watched a lot of videos and read a lot of articles. And so I came across econometric concepts that are generally taught in universities, like the Granger causality test and the A.D. Fuller test. And I found out you could do them manually as well, but I found out that an easier way to do it is to use Python. And so because I was already familiar with it, I decided, oh, why not incorporate this into my extended essay as well? And so I watched a couple more videos, I taught myself the concept, and then I just carried it out.
That's amazing, Muzna. I think a lot of our layman term audience who's not familiar with economics are probably very intimidated by the terms that you're using. But I think the takeaway for everyone is a self-learning, is that you can access these resources online and teach yourself if you are patient and willing enough. Can you walk us through, because for the UK, the way the UK works is your grades are extremely important.
Yeah.
The courses you take are extremely important. It's your personal statement or your essay, especially when you're looking at Oxbridge, which captures the attention of the admissions committee or not. One way that the UK system is different from the US. In the US, you have a general admissions committee, not subject experts who are looking at your application, whereas in the UK, and then at Cambridge, you have the economics department, which would be looking at your personal statement. So walk us through, what was your personal statement about, so that the audience has a little bit of a clue.
Yeah. So my UK personal statement, it was very heavily academic, because generally that's what UK statements are all about. And so I started off by writing about my life in Qatar versus in Pakistan, because I lived in Qatar for 10 years, but I've done my high school in Pakistan, so I could really compare and contrast that standard of living, I would say. And again, that's a huge concept I found that links to economics as well. And so essentially what I did was I linked it to economics, and I mentioned 3 books actually in my personal statement. One that's more like a novel that I learned as part of my course, and other 2 which I read in my own time that were also economics related. And I linked that, and then I also tried to justify a little bit my MYP score. I was like, because of the move and COVID and all that. And I mentioned my extracurriculars, such as my the internship I was talking about, as well as 2 others, which was the Blue Ocean Entrepreneurship Competition, and then this IB conference that was held in Russia. me and my sister, we got chosen to be speak in it, and it was again economics related. So yeah, I mentioned that as well, and yeah, that was pretty much my statement.
So once again, for my audience, important takeaways: academic references, doing readings outside of your course curriculum, and incorporating that into your personal statement. So she had 3 of those. And then it's very interesting. I know Muzna has done tons of extracurriculars, but the
Yeah.
ones which were weaved into your personal statement were the ones related to economics.
Yeah.
And so, whether it was the internship, whether it was the IB conference, another academic engagement, or the Blue Ocean Entrepreneurship competition, another kind of academic engagement,
Yeah.
that I think has more weightage than a lot of the other stuff that students tend to put in,
yeah.
which is, volunteer work and athletics, and all of that is great and it's very important. But it's important to realize that for the UK, it's really about the academics and it's really about your academic engagement. So I think, that was very, very important
Yeah.
to incorporate all of that. Tell us a little bit, and so for our audience, those students who are applying to either Oxford or Cambridge, everyone has to write the personal statement. That goes to all UK universities. But for Oxbridge, you have to give a test. Most students have to give a test. And depending on the course you wish to study, the test is different. The test is step 1. If you clear the test and you get good marks, you get called in for an interview, which is once again done by the department. So, Muzna, explain to me a little bit, how did you prepare for the test? Because the test is not something that the school prepares you for.
So the test for both Cambridge and Oxford, they're pretty challenging. They're very, compared to the SAT, I would say.
You really, I'm glad you're laying it out there.
If you prepare 1 month for the SAT, I'm sure you'd have to prepare at least 3 months for the UK test.
Wow.
So I started preparing in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, because the test I gave for Cambridge, it was the TMUA. It's a math-centered test. And then my sister for Oxford, she did the TSA, which is more of a thinking and English.
Analytical and logical, yeah.
So for myself, the TMUA, it's quite hard. There's a lot of concepts that weren't even on my syllabus. So then I had to take extra classes with my math teacher. I'm so thankful he was willing to help me. And then I had to first teach myself those concepts. And then the past papers, they are available online. So it's really about you, how much effort you want to put into it. And so, yeah, I just kept practicing that. And then even though my test, it wasn't required for my course in Cambridge, I still wanted to give myself that exposure and test myself essentially.
I find it very interesting that you say that it took you 3 months to prepare and that it was easier than the SAT. I think that's a light bulb moment. That was harder than the SAT. Yeah. That was a light bulb moment for me. So I'm sure that's something for other students to think about. For SAT, I tell students that a minimum you need to prepare for it for 2 months if you want to crack, 1520, 1530. And so if this is harder, guys, really give yourself the whole summer, particularly if your curriculum is not teaching you those math concepts, because you have to go out of your way to learn them. So you got the good news that you made it to the interview, Muzna. What was your reaction?
I was thrilled, honestly. But with Cambridge, they do give interviews to 70 or 80% of the applicants. So I think your personal statement first has to be very strong, just to make that cut. And then talking to other people who also got these offers, they were then it's your interview that just carries you.
So tell me about the interview. How many people were there and did they introduce themselves? Who were they?
So when I first joined, it was the main room. It was Zoom.
Okay, so it's a virtual interview.
Yeah, it was virtual. And so when I joined, there were around 10 or so other students that were there. I know that there were a lot of interviews happening simultaneously in breakout rooms. And so whenever someone would join, they would they would check your ID, your name and all that. And then they would send you to the waiting breakout room. And from there, you would get moved to your accordingly. And so for my first interview, it was actually a case study. And they send you that case study 1 hour before the interview.
Wow.
So you log on to Zoom and they give you the password, and then you're allowed to leave the Zoom session and you can access the case study, you can make notes and whatnot. But the thing about the case study is they let you leave the Zoom meeting because it's not like you can search it up on Google and somehow get the answer. It's just a case study. You have to analyze it yourself. And it was pretty long, I would say. So I just sat there with like a pen and paper making notes. Yeah, and then after the hour, I had 2 interviews. So then my first interview started, and this one was by a professor, I think, in the economics department. And so the first interview was mainly about me as well as the case study itself. So they asked a lot about my personal statement. Like they made sure that everything I wrote in there was actually true. They asked about the internship, the extracurriculars, like what I did in the extracurriculars, and then as well as they made sure that the books I mentioned, like I actually read them. So make sure you guys actually read the books.
So caveat over there, for some of my students who are usually not willing to put in the work, they read the summary and they would, put in the reference in their personal statement. You can get away with that for any university with the exception of Oxbridge, because they will check you whether you actually read the book or not. Note to self, revise the book you read before
before my interview, I like skimmed through both books again just to be on the safe side. And then when they were asking me about the book, like I mentioned like a very specific example that you would actually have to read to know. And when I mentioned that, then the interviewer, like as soon as I mentioned it, he was like, "Oh yeah, she read the book," and then we moved on from that. So yeah, reading.
So yeah, they are trying to check, did you actually read the book? So guys, these are small tips. You want to make sure that you reread the books that you actually put in your personal statement, or read them for the first time. But make sure that you have read them, and you can demonstrate that you read them. So that was very interesting. Muzna, what else? Clearly they were checking everything in your personal statement. Were there any content related questions?
Yes, there were.
They were.
Yeah. So when we moved on to the case study, I was expecting a more like in-depth question answer about the case study. But what the interviewer did, which I found very interesting, was that everything in the case study, he was trying to relate it back to my own extracurriculars. Like, for example, I did a research internship on the stock market, right? And so he was linking that to economics, then to the case study. And so he was really like trying to get me to think about my answers. And so there was one instance I remember in the interview where he asked me a question, and I didn't know what to say. So I was like, okay, you know what, so then I just said to the interviewer, "Oh, I'm not too sure how to go about this answer." And so he was like, "Oh, that's perfectly fine." And then he essentially guided me into the right answer. Or with economics, it's like there can be more than one right answer. So they want to see the way you think and the way you justify how you think, and to check like whether your knowledge is in depth or you're just like going over the surface level. And so the examples that I gave to back up my answers, I made sure that they were really in depth, and you got to show off sometimes your knowledge in the subject area. And so my other extracurriculars, because they were centered around economics, and I also did some reading before my interview, like on The Economist, about real world situations that are happening now, especially like in the Pakistan and the UK. So I made sure to like link that in, and so yeah, my interview went pretty well, I would say.
So guys, I know many students who have made it to the interview stage, and then they're like, we're not quite sure why we don't have an offer from Oxbridge. It's your performance during the interview. And they are checking for multiple things, but primarily they're checking for, do you know how to go about analyzing a situation? And also, how well versed are you in your discipline? And the fact that Muzna went the extra mile to read about the situations of the country she lives in and the country she's applying to, and kind of linking those examples just makes for the perfect candidate.
Yeah.
Muzna, if for your juniors who are eyeing Oxbridge, what words of advice would you give them?
I would say that the course you want to apply to matters a lot because for me, land economy, it's a mixture between law, environmental studies, and economics. So if there's something in your course that you don't know about, like for example, I don't take environmental science, neither do I know much about law. So I had to teach myself a little bit, at least the basics of that beforehand. Like I got in contact with my economics course teacher. She really helped me to like break down, what I should do, what I should essentially look at before the interview. And in the interview, they did ask me questions related to especially environmental studies. And so I was so glad that I did look at this beforehand. Yeah, so the course you guys choose, make sure you know at least the basics of it because they're not going to expect you to know like some university level knowledge, but you know the basics. They know your subject combination, they know the extracurriculars you did, and so when you show them that, hey, I went out of my comfort zone to read this, it shows that you're passionate and you really want to be here. And essentially in the interview, you want to be confident with what you're saying. Even if you're not 100% sure that it's correct, if you're confident, it gives that vibe to the interviewer that, hey, I know this, that I want to be here and this is what I want to do.
I think that is just so beautifully put. The confidence, the passion, how you interact with the interviewer, even to the point where you said, I'm not exactly sure about this answer, and having him kind of guide you through the process has a lot to do with your confidence in your subject knowledge. So you really need to make sure for Oxbridge that your subject knowledge is sound, not just both in your course curriculum, but going outside as well. Is there any other advice that you would give your juniors, Muzna? Anything you'd like to share with them about this process? If you could go over and redo anything.
I think I'm happy with what I did.
Oh, that's excellent.
I think that it's important, this is like personal to me, even if after your O levels or MIP doesn't go that well because you're going through something or there's been a big change in your life or just overall it didn't go that well, you shouldn't lose hope. Even if there's people around you who are saying that, it's a long shot, it's a stretch, I think you should really just try your best, do all the extracurriculars that you possibly can. It's the end result is obviously up to Allah, but you'll be happy if you put in that work. And if you put in that work, then inshallah you'll be happy with no matter the outcome. At least in the future, you won't have regrets that, I could have done this better, I could have done this harder. So just do your best.
Thank you so much for that, Muzna. I think that is so important as a takeaway, that you should give it your all, that there should be no regrets in the process, and you should always be, looking to achieve your dream. At Ion Ivy, as well as I'm sure your school, Learning Alliance International, everyone's extremely proud of your achievement and accomplishment. And we wish you the very, very best of luck, Muzna. Thank you so much for taking out the time to share your insights with us today. I'm sure, people who are tuning in now have a better idea of how to navigate this space and prepare themselves for their Oxbridge applications.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.